Hey guys, I'm Alex. Welcome to the course on how to price your haircuts for barbers and stylists. Now, it's not just about haircuts, that's what the title says, but it actually goes for any service that you offer. The method that we're going to go over is exactly the same no matter what service you offer, whether you're a barber, hairstylist, cosmetologist, nail technicians, any service related business. This is going to apply for you. And we're also going to go over some other ways that you can make additional money without even touching your prices. So let's just get right into it. So, who am I? My name's Alex Jaramillo. I own a barbershop in Jacksonville, Florida. We currently have two locations and we've been operating since about 2015, but I've been a barber since 2014. So I've learned a lot. I've also made a lot of mistakes, and I've seen others do the same exact things that I'm going to go over in this presentation. And my goal with this is that you can take what I've learned and hopefully avoid the mistakes that I made when it comes to pricing. Now, before we get into like how to price your services, there's a lot of things that you have to get over that are in your head first. And honestly, this is probably going to be the hardest part of the whole thing, which is why I'm starting with this. So you have to get into the right mindset around pricing. You have to realize that unless you're running a nonprofit, like your business needs you to make a profit. This is where all of the growth for your business is going to come from. It doesn't matter what type of barbershop or salon or whatever you run, the formula is the same. It's revenue minus expenses equals profit. And if there is no profit, then you will not have anything left over to reinvest into the business, to give yourself a raise, to give your barbers a raise if you have others working for you. So you need to make profit in order for your business to grow. Even if you don't want to grow your business anymore, I'm sure you want to be able to take your families on vacations, buy nice things, and you can't do that unless you have profit. Now, the problem with profit is that a lot of people guess, and they hope that at the end of the year that the revenue was greater than the expenses, and that hope is not a good strategy. So I'll just leave that there. But you want to plan for profit, which we'll get into that later. And as it's much easier, said than done for sure. But you can't feel bad, right? And I'm going to also tie like to not shop with somebody else's wallet in there, because when it comes to pricing, we tend to think about what we would want to pay for this product or this service or whatever, right? But you are not your customer. Now, the chances are you're probably wanting to work with people that are similar to you. But keep in mind, like, there are people out there that will make way less money than you, about the same. And then there are people that make way more money than you out there. And so chances are, let's say you charge $40 for a haircut. Now, for some people, that's going to sound really, really high. Some people are going to be like, well, that sounds reasonable. And then others are going to be like, oh, that's way too cheap. But your price didn't change, right? So the idea is you can't feel bad when you're charging the price. Once you do the math that we're going to go over and you figure out this is what I need to charge in order for my business to be profitable, that's what the price is, right? And the only way you can bring that down is if you find a way to bring your expenses down. But otherwise, this is what your business needs for you to have a profit. Otherwise, like, you're just, giving your clients a discount at your expense, at your family's expense, right? So I also think that you want to be able to charge as much as possible, meaning like whatever the market will pay is what you should charge. So just because, you do the math later and you find that maybe you can you can be profitable at, a $30 or $25 haircut price, right? But if the market around you is willing to pay more, then that's just more profit for you, right? So let's say you do the math and you're like, you know what, $25 is about the right price. And maybe if you're a newer shop and you just need to get clients in the door, fine, start lower, right? As long as you're still profitable. But if the market is willing to pay more, then go to as high as you possibly can. And we can get into strategies on how to, make your services seem more valuable later. But the idea is, don't be limited by the math that we're going to do later to figure out what you need to charge in order for your prices to be at a point where your business is profitable. If you can get away with more, charge more, right? Like if you're super, super busy, well, this is definitely something we'll get into later about, when to raise your prices. But if you're crazy, crazy busy, it may be time to raise your prices, even if you're at a price point where you're profitable. I mean, that's one of the strategies you can use to kind of cool it off and maybe kind of shake the tree a little bit and maybe get rid of some of the cheaper clients. Like you can raise your prices a little bit and it'll actually slow the shop down, but you'll still be more profitable, which is crazy. So I think you should charge as much as possible when it comes to pricing. And then when you charge premium prices, of course, you can serve your clients better. Because, like I said earlier when we started, profit is what pays for all of this, right? So if you want to go to shows, if you, let's say you're an individual barber, you're running your own business, whether you're an independent contractor, a sweet guy or girl, and you have a shop, right? You need profit to be able to pay for continuing education, if you want to go to these hair shows, if you want to buy some new tools, some new equipment, you need profit to pay for those things, right? And that's just going to go benefit your clients in the future. So if your barbers are better trained, if you are better trained, if you have better tools and equipment, you will be better able to serve your clients. And you will also be able to invest in more amenities, right? You can invest in better waiting room chairs. You can start offering drinks and snacks in the waiting area for free, right? Because the profit from the haircuts and services is paying for all of that. It's not coming out of your pocket. It's like the clients are really paying for their own amenities at that point. But you can start to invest into the shop to further increase the perceived value of your services, which is going to allow you to then charge even more later, right? And then if you're able to charge premium prices and have a profit, then you can hire better barbers and stylists if that is your goal, right? Because one thing I realized when I was first starting was you can't, I've always been against like having like being at the top of the price scale in my market. But then I realized one day it just hit me. I was like, I cannot hire good barbers, pay them well, and be cheap, like as far as haircuts go, right? The math doesn't math, like where's the money gonna come from if you're paying this barber, at the top of the market, whatever their pay is. But let's say like, you're wanting to pay them 50, 60, 70 grand a year, and where's that money gonna come from? Like it has to come from the pricing, and you can build all of that into your pricing by doing the math that we're going to do later. But the idea is, if you're struggling to find good help, if you run a barbershop or a salon or whatever, any kind of service business, and you are struggling to find help, one of the things could be that maybe you just need to pay more, but your business needs to have profit in order for you to be able to pay more, right? So pricing can fix a lot of things in your business. It's not going to fix everything, right? But if you get the pricing down, everything else might become a little bit easier. All right, so let's talk about some of the common mistakes that I see in pricing, and I've made every single one of these mistakes. So during this presentation, I'm sorry if it makes it seem like, I'm some god and I made up all this stuff, and I didn't make up any of this stuff. Somebody taught me, right? I made every single mistake that I'm going to go over in this presentation. And my goal is just to make sure you don't make the same mistakes. But I see a lot of people doing the same mistakes that we're going to cover here. So tell me if this sounds familiar. Have you heard, something about $1 a minute or something like that? I don't know about you, but when I was in barber school, that was for some reason that was like what we were supposed to shoot for, was $1 a minute, right? Um, and you know what? That actually ended up coming in handy later, which I'll talk about. But $1 a minute is that what does that mean? Like, what if you need more than that? Like, you need to be able to do the math to figure out what your rate is. At our first barbershop, but one thing that I took from that, even though that was just kind of some arbitrary number that my barber instructor threw out there when I asked him, how much he charged for designs, and he's like $1 a minute. I'm like, okay. But I never forgot that, and I never went below that. So when we first opened our first barbershop, it was 2015, and I was charging $16. And at the time, we were doing haircuts in 15 minutes. So if you do the math, right, it's more than $1 a minute. So we've never gone below $1 a minute ever since 2015 when we opened. And then as a business grew, we started to realize, like, where's the money going? Because like the revenue was going up and the expenses were as well. Because as you hire people, as you buy things, you know, you start to realize, like, wait, revenue is climbing, but profit isn't. So pricing is one of the easiest levers you can pull to create more profit in a business. But we realized that revenue was climbing, but we were actually losing more money. And sometimes you can actually grow yourself out of business. We've certainly gotten really, really close to that. So that's why I'm doing this, because I hope that none of you make the same mistakes that I did, right? So we ended up raising our prices to 17, which honestly, we just kind of made that number up. This was like 2016, maybe 2017, when we went from 16 to 17, which is like, I was like horrified at this decision. I thought, like, oh my God, we're going to lose so many clients by going up $1. And just for context, we charge 40 now, right? So this shows you like where my mind was back then. But yeah, I thought that the jump from 16 to 17, we're going to lose like half of our clients. And the reality is, yeah, we lost some for sure, but we ended up making more profit. It still wasn't enough, but it was the first lesson in raising prices, which was that whenever you raise prices, you're probably not going to lose as many clients as you think, and you're going to make more profit off less people. Yeah, you're going to have some people that don't come back, because of $1, right? But the reality is, like, you're probably going to keep more people than you think, and the people that do stay, you're going to make more off of them. So then it's like win-win. I can make more money with less people. What? That's crazy. Yeah, well, that's exactly what happens. So we also started to do is, when I started to think about that rate, $1 a minute. So then I started to tie, okay, so then the longer a service takes, the more it should cost. Because if I'm doing a haircut that takes 15 minutes, I'm going to charge $16 or $17 for that. But if somebody comes in and they want, a haircut and a shave, like, and let's say at the time that took me 30 minutes, haircut and a shave, then the rate should be the same, right? Because I don't understand why some people, will do like, your haircut is 30 minutes. And then if you want to add a beard on, which is, an additional 15 minutes, so you're at 45 minutes total, they're only going to add on like $5 for the beard, but they were charging like 30 for the haircut. I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, because the rate is not the same there. So I think the rate should always be the same when it comes to pricing. And we made these same mistakes. What we started doing was, we realized that, okay, the longer a service should take, the more it's going to cost, right? Because the rate has to be the same. And then, so when we opened our second location, that was the biggest test when it came to pricing, because we realized, oh my gosh, we thought we were profitable with one, but the second you open, and hopefully you guys have this problem, But the second you go from one location to two and beyond, um, my God, it is like not just like twice the work. It is honestly like 10 times the work. And it's the only thing guaranteed that's going to happen when you expand is it's like, say if you go from one to two, your expenses are going to double. That's Your revenue is not going to double, not right away. Hopefully it does, right? But the only guaranteed thing that's going to happen on day one is that your expenses are going to double. So now that first location, the busy one, has to be profitable enough to not just pay for itself, but also potentially cover the losses from the second one. So we realized around that time that something had to change. And that's when we had to learn to really price our services, which is what we're going to go over. But we also realized that we couldn't do these like dollar jumps anymore. It had to be like a significant price increase in order for us to get out of this hole that we created by opening a second location. So some of the mistakes that I've done with pricing, I've made every single mistake on here. And I see a lot of other people still doing this. Is first thing is you charge based on what your last barbershop charged. Let's say you just left a shop and they were charging, $20 for a haircut at your old shop. So, now let's say you're on your own now, or you have your own barbershop. So now I'm like, okay, well, since that's what my last spot was charging, that's what I'm going to charge. Well, what if how do you know that $20 is right for you, basically, right? Just because your last shop was charging that doesn't mean that's what you and your business needs in order to be successful. So you need to be able to do the math to figure it out. Don't just go off what your last shop charged. That's exactly what I did too. Actually, I did a discount actually because I see people do this too. When I left my shop where I started at, they were charging 17. So then when I opened up my spot, I'm like, well, I'm afraid to lose my clients. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start at 16. So that way they get a discount if they come to me. And you know what? Yeah, I did bring a lot of clients with me, but then, like we had those problems later when I started to realize like, oh, man, 16 is not enough. Even 17 was not enough to become profitable based on the expenses that are now a reality for my business, right? So another thing that I see that I've done and that I've seen people do is charging based on like the average of the area, right? And I've literally done this before. I made like a spreadsheet and I was just like, okay, we're gonna call every barber shop in like a 5 mile radius, and we're just gonna ask them. And I would literally just call them and ask them like, okay, so how much is the haircut? And they would say $20, right? And I would just hang up and I would just write it down. And then I just did it again and again. And I called everybody within, that was really close to me to try to figure out, okay, what is like the average or like the market rate? And then what I did was I would just kind of find like the middle number. And I was like, okay, that's my price. Right. But again, like, how do you know that what the shop down the street is charging is what you should charge? You don't, unless you've done the math. You're just guessing. And then the other thing that I see people, especially on social media, preaching is charge what you're worth. Well, how do you know what you're worth? You know, if if you're not busy, you don't have any clients. Does that mean you're worthless? And so, what if you're crazy busy? Still, then, what is your worth? So, your worth is, I think, where you're able, like what we first talked about, what you're able to get from the market. If you're able to charge $100 and the market is willing to pay it, and you know that the market's willing to pay it because you'll be busy, right? The perfect scenario is like you're able to raise your prices and you hardly lose any clients. You stay exactly the same, except you're just making more. That's how you know what you're worth, right? So, but you knowing what you're worth is, I think, is a terrible way to think about pricing, because you need to figure out what your business needs in order to sustain itself. And that's what you charge. and that might be more than what you think you're worth. It might be less, but the reality is, if you don't know the numbers, then you're just guessing, right? And you don't know that what you're charging is enough to even cover your expenses. And usually you realize it too late. Usually you realize it when, okay, and it's the first of the month, rent's due, payrolls due if you run a shop, all the expenses, credit card bills are due. If you have any loans are due now. And then plus you got your business expenses, and you got your personal expenses. So then you usually don't realize it till it's too late, when all the bills are due, right? And you've paid all the bills, and now all of a sudden you have nothing left, or worse, you go negative, right? Which has happened. It's happened to me. So this is a symptom, right? This is a symptom of the fact that you might not be charging enough to maintain your business. Now we can get into the math part, right? Which honestly, I don't expect a lot of you guys to do this, even though this is the main thing that we're offering with this course here. But this is the most important thing that probably most people will never do, and that's just simply calculating your prices. And the reason why is because it takes a lot of work. Honestly, I'm not gonna sugar. This took a lot of work for me to figure out what our prices should be, and but that's the way it should be, right? You don't, either way, it's going to be a lot of work. It's because if you don't know what you should be charging, then it's going to be a lot of work trying to figure out, okay, I just need to put in more hours, or try to figure out how I can make more money so that way I can pay the bills next month. So you're going to do the work either way. Might as well do this once, because you only have to do it once. And then after that, you just keep an eye on it just to see, okay, if my expenses have changed, then I might need to recalculate my prices, right? And this is what all big businesses do. Like, they do not guess when it comes to pricing. This is what our expenses are. This is what the market rate is. Can we charge at or above the market rate, still be profitable, right? And then they figure it out based on math. But for some reason, barbers and hairstylists don't do this. I do see some that know this, and you can tell. But the reality is, I think most people out there are just guessing when it comes to their prices. And it's the reason why they probably aren't making as much as they could be. And it was the same with us. So I'm going to show you how we calculate our prices at our shop. So before we get into that, though, I wanted to define some terms real quick. So expenses are anything like, your rent, your supplies, like your barber side, if you use neck strips, whatever you provide for yourself or for your barbers, those are expenses, right? Your retail, we're not going to consider that an expense. That's more like a accounting, like cost of goods sold type of thing. And then you want to figure out, this is the hard part right here, I think. Hold on one second, I'll go back. So the hours available, right? You really need to know this number. And what hours available means is, this was the amount of hours that was available for clients to book. So meaning, like, if you have an online booking software, and somebody is able to go online and save that spot, and now they have an appointment, we need to count that, right? And then what I would do is with the way I was taught, you need to do this for a 6-month period, right? And this is why I think I lost some of you just now, but 6 months of hours available is what you need to start with. And then you need to figure out of those hours that were available, how many were sold, or in other words, how many hours of those hours available were booked. So when barbers are saying, like, I'm booked, this is what they mean is, in a lot of cases, I'm booked means out of the hours available, you sold 100% of them. So you're working for 8, 9, 10-hour day, right? Let's say 10, and then you're fully booked from open to close. It's all 10 hours. That's 100%. You're 100% booked, right? And we would define that in our shop. We would define that as productivity. So the difference of how many hours are available versus how much is sold, we call that productivity. So if you have 10 hours available for clients to book, and you have 5 of them booked, you would be 50% productive. You're 50% booked, which is not good, right? You want to get that number up. But when I say these numbers, when I say these terms later, you're going to want to remember these terms here. And then margin is basically the difference between revenue and expenses, right? So that hopefully there's a difference there, and it's a positive difference. So if we're charging, $80 an hour for our services, and then it costs $60 an hour to run the shop, then the difference is $20, and that is the margin, the profit margin in the services, right? And then the rate. So what I mean by rate is the dollar. We talked earlier about $1 per minute. That was the rate when we first started. It was a little bit higher than that, but let's just say it was $1 a minute. So we need to figure out what the rate is based on what we need to charge per hour. And then once we have the rate figured out, then we can use that to figure out the pricing for any service on our menu. Now, I know that seems really overwhelming, but trust me, if you don't do this, you're just going to be guessing, right? And we used to not track anything. So the cool thing is that there's a lot of softwares out there now that will track all of these things for you, or most of these things. So for example, the hours available and the hours sold and the productivity took the longest for me to figure out, because the software we were using at the time was called Square. You might have heard of it. And it didn't track any of this stuff, right? But the software we use now is called Zenoti, and it tracks everything, right? So it makes this process a lot easier if you have a software that can track this for you too. There's some other softwares that I know do it, like Millennium has a software called Mevo or Mevo 2. There's another software called Forest with a PH, Forest, and I believe it tracks these numbers as well. So you need to get, a software that can, if you want your life to be easier, because you might have to do this again, let's say in 6 months, a year, when your expenses go up, you need to make sure that you're pricing appropriately. You need to do this again. And if your software can track that for you, then it's going to make everything so much easier. Because again, we didn't used to track this stuff, right? And then that you're just kind of flying blind if you're not tracking any of these things. So we're going to start getting into the numbers now on how to track this. I'm getting the end to the 30-minute limit that this software that I'm using uses to record this presentation. So I'm actually going to stop it here, and then we'll start on our next video. We're going to start actually calculating how to calculate our prices. So you can stop it here, and I will see you in the next video.